Hey, it's good to see everybody again. I know it's been a little while. Uh, the funny thing is we took a little break last week because we had that little weather thing where we ended up getting about 2.5, 3 inches. A little icy in some places, but I thought it was going to be a little worse. And then I thought, all right, so now we got another little thing coming. And who knew we were going to break records? Okay. As a matter of fact, to honor probably my best friend over the last couple of days, on my Facebook page, I actually posted a picture of my snowblower. Because, boy, Big Red, because he's a Big Red snowblower, Big Red did a job. And I hope that you guys all got through all this. I know some of you might still be digging out. One of the things is I live in Ringwood, which is still, northern Passaic County. But at least, even though, I got a neighbor on the right, a neighbor on the left, I still have a good-sized backyard, and I have a decent-sized front yard, and I have a place to put the snow. I know I saw a video of where my parents lived down in Lyndhurst, and oh my God. But especially, some of my relatives in places, whether people I know in Cliffside Park, or especially in Hudson County and like Bayonne and Union City and Jersey City where I have relatives. Man, there's just no place to put the snow. I just don't know what you guys are doing and how you're getting through it. So I hope everybody's been getting through it. I know cars got buried by the plows, if a plow did get to your street yet. I just heard from somebody yesterday who lives in Patterson. Yesterday at 10 a.m. was the first time a plow came through their street. So hopefully you guys have been getting through this. The book quizzes you did very well. Glad to see some of your favorite books. You guys explaining your favorite books. And there was somebody in particular, I don't remember who it was. Somebody's favorite book was my favorite book when I was in middle school and high school, and that, of course, was The Outsiders by S.E. Hinton. I was so enthralled by it when I first heard they were going to make a movie about it. I sent a letter to the director and saying, please, you got to put me in the movie, but I don't know, they decided to put some people like Tom Hanks and Rob Lowe and Patrick Swayze and Emilio Estevez and other people I'd never heard of. So those were the stars of the movie. Matt Dillon, who the hell are these guys? So, but hey, it was great to see your favorite books. Again, the first mass medium. But let's talk about the next one. Okay? Let's talk about the next one, especially here over in the colonies. All right? The New World. Now, one of the things about people, it doesn't matter when you know what? I think I'm going to do it this way. I'm getting a little bit of glare here. There's less glare. Okay. It doesn't matter what generation, what century you grew up in. People always have an innate desire for information. It's always been that way. Okay? So, as now we're coming over into the New World. All right? People are starting to bring over those printing presses and printing out books. You had that desire for information. And every once in a while, if you had a little town, a lot of people were farmers. I mean, agriculture and farming was pretty much the number one source of income for anyone in the 16 and 1700s in the New World. And we're talking all the 13 colonies and beyond. And when you needed to know what was going on, if you wanted to know what was going on, you'd maybe one day a week you'd travel into town, and you usually lived within a couple of miles of a little village or something like that. And there would be like a municipal building, what we see today in some places, they still have like the county courthouse in a town square. And of course what would happen is somebody would come out, and they'd stand on a tree stump, this way, and they could be seen and heard by everybody. And they'd get a ringer. Ching, 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 hear ye, here is the news of the week. And what they would do is, this was a person called the town crier. And they would go ahead and tell you if there were births, if there were deaths, if a new business had opened, if new family had moved into the area and who they were, where they were from. But especially if you lived near the coast, let's say you were in New Jersey or Virginia or something like that, if there were ships that were leaving and where they were going, if new ships were expected to come in, what they were bringing in, and this was important. But you know what? Sometimes you're a farmer and you're working on it, you simply can't get in, especially, horse and wagon. My horse got a bad hoof. So what they decided to do is let's take the news of the day when we can and we'll put it on. We've got this new, Gutenberg printing press that just arrived. We might as well just put the news on one piece of paper and send it out. And this way, somebody can get it here in the town square and then take it to whoever they need to, and that person could pass it on to another, and another. Or you could send it through when postal delivery had begun. You could do it that way. But still, it was sporadic. There were some people who tried to start a regular newspaper. There was a guy in Boston in 1704. He started something called the Boston Newsletter, John Campbell. But the only reason why John Campbell did that is he wanted somebody to see the article he wrote about, I'm trying to sell some land in Long Island. Once somebody bought the land in Long Island, he stopped printing. And he really didn't put much of anything as what you would call news. But in 1729, there was a young entrepreneur who recognized that, not only could I make money on this, but it could be important. It could be important, especially for my people, the people of Philadelphia. And of course, in 1729, the guy who started the first regular newspaper in the United States was none other than a young guy by the name of Benjamin Franklin. Benjamin Franklin, amazing what this founding father did. We already talked about in the last chapter in 1731, he started the first lending library. I mean, think about it. Every single one of our townships has a public library, thanks to Benjamin Franklin. But 2 years before he even did the lending library, he starts the first ever newspaper, the Pennsylvania Gazette. And again, that's what the Gazette would have. The Gazette would have all kinds of different things. It started printing out like once a week and then 3 times a week. And it did this for several decades. So he had a regular newspaper that went on right up until the time he had to come and create a country called the United States. And go over to France, secure the funding and the troops to come over and to help us win the Revolutionary War. So Ben Franklin ran that at least 4 decades. The Pennsylvania Gazette ran and printed at least 3 days a week. So that was the first ever regular newspaper. But at the time, newspapers were expensive. They were expensive. So because you were paying for the paper and you were paying for the ink, and of course, if you had reporters, people who were writing, you had to pay them too. And so you had to charge, and not a whole lot of people knew how to read anyway. Even though we were starting, thanks to what the Puritans came over with the Cambridge Press and the Besom Book, and John Adams' descendants who were, or the descendants of his grandparents and stuff, who were making sure that you knew how to read and to write, public education. But still, it was just too expensive for a lot of people to get a newspaper. So that's what pretty much started the political press. And now, whoever could put out a newspaper was usually political parties. And that's what actually got some people in trouble, is they were starting to, especially around the 1760s, 1770s, starting to get a little antsy with the king and some of his rules, the King of England. And it's like, yeah, you're the king over there and we're over here and you're taxing us, and taxation without representation is tyranny. And of course, there were some newspapers that would get shut down, and that helped also lead to the Revolutionary War. Well, after the war is over, again, newspapers are very expensive, but it's mostly the political parties. So this is why this is called the political press era. From 1790 to 1830, because only the political parties. And you see for the first time what really led to our press, our freedoms, get challenged just within a few years. Now, in 1791, that's when we adopt the First Amendment to the Constitution. The Constitution was ratified in 1789, and the Bill of Rights, the First Amendment, was adopted in 1791, written by James Madison. Now, of course, the First Amendment calls for freedom of speech, freedom of the press, okay? And that, of course, meant you could say whatever you wanted. That's why we fought the Revolution, because the king was restricting what we could say. Well, we wanted to say what we wanted. Yet 7 years after the adoption of the First Amendment, of the Bill of Rights, you see the first challenge. And unfortunately, the first challenge came from this guy right here. Yep, I know, there we go. I want to make sure you don't see the glare. That, of course, is our second president, John Adams. One of my favorite presidents. He just made one big mistake. Now, John Adams did a lot of things in his life, a lot of great things, to help found this country, to help set in place who we are and what we're about. There's a lot of people who don't even know this. I didn't learn this in my history class. I learned this from reading my favorite book, which is the biography of John Adams by the great David McCullough. John Adams defended the British soldiers at the Boston Massacre. Now, he wasn't supporting what they were doing in Boston, okay? But what he said is that if we are going to have a nation, if we're going to later establish ourselves as our own nation free of England, we have to establish it by the rule of law and not by the rule of the mob. And he successfully defended, as the people who were killed at the Boston Massacre, the British soldiers were found not guilty thanks to the work of John Adams. But of course, he would then later become a member of the Continental Congress. He would help Thomas Jefferson write the Declaration of Independence, and then of course becomes our second president. And in the great HBO miniseries, John Adams, which is based on that book by David McCullough, the great Paul Giamatti, the actor who's playing John Adams, and Laura Linney, unbelievable actress playing his wife, she's reading these political newspapers and she's reading the things they're saying about John Adams. Now, if you think what people were saying about Trump was bad, let me tell you something. 1790s, they weren't holding back, especially because even though they were very good friends in the 1770s, by the 1790s, John Adams and Thomas Jefferson were clashing. And Jefferson's people were putting out in newspapers bad things about John Adams. Well, John Adams, and you see this great scene in the miniseries where Abigail Adams is reading these things about her husband and she's almost crying in tears. How could they say this about her? What did they do? How could they do this to you? And he's looking at his wife and the pain that she's in, and boom, he passes in 1798 the Alien and Sedition Act, which meant that if you wrote something against the government in a newspaper, you could be arrested and charged with sedition. Oh my God. And a couple of people they were only really just held. Their newspapers were only stopped briefly, but oh my God. Of course, 2 years later, John Adams ran for re-election and was trounced. Absolutely trounced. It was a landslide. As a matter of fact, the way they used to run it was just the House of Representatives and the Senate would vote, not the general public, but the people who you voted to represent you would vote. And there were 3 people running for president. After the first round of voting, John Adams finished a distant third. He was out. Now, the other 2 were tied. That, of course, was John Adams and, Aaron Burr, the man who would later shoot Alexander Hamilton. So now Burr and Jefferson, they keep going until finally Jefferson breaks the tie and is elected president. When Jefferson becomes president in 1800, or in the spring of 1801, he immediately doesn't renew the Alien and Sedition Act. And pretty much newspapers weren't touched after that. And they pretty much haven't been since, and we'll talk more about that in the law chapter. But yeah, pretty much newspapers have been able to say whatever they want without any much impunity. Now, in those early days after the Revolution, during that political press era, there was something going on in this country. And what happened is that even though it had kind of started beforehand, the immigration after the Revolution, let me see, there's a picture. That's New York Harbor in the 1830s. Okay? Of course, no skyscrapers yet. But that is New York City Harbor, and you see all the ships. All right? New York just became a hub. I mean, we've got immigrants coming from all over the world. They're coming to the new world. Hey, this is new country. And because there was vast amounts of land and vast amounts of opportunity, people were just pouring in. Well, as more and more people were pouring in, there were goods to be sold. I mean, if you're coming in, you're going to need clothes, you're going to need food, you're going to need furniture, a place to live, whatever. How do you find out where you get this stuff? Okay? And every minute, every second, another great movie some of you may, if you guys are like Leo DiCaprio fans, if you ever see like the beginnings of the movie Gangs of New York, even though some of the movie takes place later on in the 1860s, but seeing all of these people pouring off the ships in New York City Harbor, and Manhattan was just expanding upwards and outwards. Well, how do I get people to know that I have these goods? Look, I got this shop here where I sell dry goods, or I got this shop here, I sell ladies' corsets. Ladies, how do people know that I'm down here on Water Street, or I'm over here on 2nd Avenue and I sell this stuff? Well, one guy came up with the opportunity. One guy came up with the idea of how to do this correctly. He was a newspaper guy. But remember, it's 1830, it's the political press era. Not a lot of people are able to buy a newspaper. That's because the newspaper itself was paying for everything. The ink, the paper, the printing, the reporters, everything. So in 1833, a guy comes up with an idea. And this is the guy right here. This is Benjamin Day. And what Benjamin Day does in 1833, he comes up with this idea. He says, this is what we'll do. I'm going to start printing a newspaper called the New York Sun. And I'm only going to charge 1 cent. I'm going to charge a penny. But this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to come to you, dry goods salesperson or dry goods store owner down on Water Street. And I'm going to come to you, the maker of ladies' corsets over on 2nd Avenue. And here's what's going to happen. You give me money. I will then put an advertisement of your product, your store, in my newspaper. And what you see for the first time with the New York Sun in 1833 with Benjamin Day is you see a relationship that's formed. One that is still vital today, as we will see on Sunday. Okay? And that relationship is between media and advertising. Okay? You give me money, I then provide, and it's a big D word, distribution. All right? For example, on Sunday night, we have the Super Bowl game. All right? Now, some of you may not even be football fans, might not even care for football at all. But some of the things you do know is that far and away, the most watched television event every year is the Super Bowl. Although ratings have gone down a little bit in the last couple of years. But it cost about $5.5 million just for a 30-second commercial. Okay? Because what the networks do, and I think it's Fox, or is it CBS this year? Can't remember which one. What CBS will do is they will go to an advertiser, let's say Ford. They will say to Ford Motor Company, you give me $20 million and I will give you 4 30-second commercials with at least 95 to 100 million people watching. So it's the same thing as what Benjamin Day established. You give me money, I provide distribution. And what Benjamin Day began with the New York Sun newspaper in 1833 is what we call the penny press era. And that's something that still pretty much continues today. All right, this is the first half. We're going to have 2 videos running for the newspaper chapter, okay? Because we missed a couple of days with the storm, I'm going to stop this one here, go take a break, go relax, come back in a few minutes, maybe come back tomorrow, and then watch the second half of the newspaper chapter.